In today's video, we're going to be talking about a very interesting upcoming pattern that is going to change in so many ways over the course of the next couple of weeks. This presents opportunities to add snowfall from the west through the central and into the east, as well as cold air on both sides of the nation. Let's dive into things. And right now, we're taking a look at a very different chart and different map than we would typically look at. This is the snow and ice chart. So in the blue, you see snow cover. In the white, there is no snow cover and no ice. In the orange, there's ice. So that is going to be over open water. Right now, what we're looking at is this December 25th, so Christmas Day. And it's a very interesting day because we have very far below normal snow and ice in these areas. Up here, everything is frozen as it should be, and that's not a shocker. That's going to be every December 25th. Pretty much as far as recorded history goes, as far as I know. This area is far below average, and certainly the areas to the south of here are even further below average because they've seen practically nothing. The only areas that have really cashed in on snowfall is going to be your mountainous west, so the Sierra Nevadas, your Rocky Mountains, and the Cascades, and they tend to do well regardless of anything, so that is probably why that's occurring. These areas east of the Rockies and in the United States here are the biggest strugglers as far as snowfall this year. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir right now. Now, you might be wondering, what's the point? What's the point of all this? Well, let's compare this to previous December 25th. We're actually going to take a look at 2022, 2021, and 2020 in comparison here. So let's first, this is going to be the most shocking because last December was actually very cold and very active. Here was the ice and snow cover for December 25th, 2022. Again, let me move this back. Here's December 2023. Here's December 2022. Shocking difference here, clearly. I mean, especially when you take a look at these lakes all frozen over. And here, not the Great Lakes, but in these smaller lakes, we see those orange dots popping up. And clearly, half the nation, I don't know why that just got so big, but half the nation is dealing with snow cover here, both in the west, central, and eastern states. Now let's take a look at 2021, which is a little bit more of an average year. We don't have anything crazy far to the south, but clearly these areas that I kind of drew in are dealing with good snow and ice cover. Same story with 2020 here. We actually see it dipping pretty far south in a couple of spots here in 2020 as well. So when we compare all of these to 2023 this year, there's clearly a lack of snow and ice here in these more middle ranges. Not quite temperate, not quite Arctic, but the in-between areas. For the northern US and the southern areas of Canada, this is where we've been lacking. When Arctic air masses make their way from the Arctic Circle up here, down through into Canada, and eventually into the northern states and the southern areas of Canada, they really start to lose some of their steam and warm up once they're moving over non-snow or ice covered areas. First off, that snow and ice is able to bounce the sun off of the earth. So the energy that comes from the sun, the heat, the energy is reflected off of that snow and ice. That causes things to cool down at the surface because it's not absorbing it like dirt, asphalt, anything would do that is not that white snow and ice. So those darker colors are going to absorb it more. So what we have happening is warming due to the sun and lack of ice and snow in these areas. And when any Arctic blasts try to move through here and make their way into the United States, whether it's the east here or if it's the west, they're weakening as they make their way down because they're heading through these warming areas. So this has been a huge impact in a lot of these cooldowns that we've seen all year. Now, right now, we're taking a look at the 30-day total snowfall. So this is all the snowfall that has occurred over the past 30 days. We've had some over the mountainous east here for the Appalachian Mountain Range. This has mostly occurred earlier on in December, though, I will say. Between the 30th and the 15th is when a majority of this fell. We do have really good snowpacks for these mountainous west areas like the Cascades here, Sierra Nevadas, and the Rockies, where we've seen feet of snowfall occur, and snow is still holding on. If we were to see a cool down move in from these northern areas in Canada through the northern plains and into the east, it is going to weaken over time. But if we head into a negative PNA, which I know what you're thinking, that's usually a negative thing for cold and snow in the east, but if we happen to move into a pattern featured with a negative PNA, but also a more transitional pattern, and what I mean by that is these troughs aren't staying in one place, They're moving over the west with that negative PNA, so colder temperatures over the west, and then heading eastward from this point because we're in a transitional pattern and eventually moving out. We're actually going to see more potent cold if we see it come from the west than if we see it come from the Arctic areas. This seems like a much more favorable pattern based on our current situation than it typically would be. Of course, this would usually lead towards some cold air if this was to occur. But compared to these cooldowns we've seen coming from the Arctic regions this year, I think that there's a really good argument for the fact that these ones coming from the west could actually be more cold and bring more chance at snowfall than if we see them come from Canada, which truly shows how crazy the snow and ice pack is right now in Canada and how lacking it is. To say this, that we have better ice and snow out west than we do for Canada and some of those middle areas, again, in the northern United States and southern Canada, is absolutely crazy, and I cannot remember ever feeling that way, but right now I do. Now, the reason I bring this up is because this is the pattern that we expect to head into, thankfully. So this could be the saving grace here. These types of patterns, again, the trough moving from western Canada down through western United States and through the central, through the east, and eventually up, is going to be a lot better than these ones coming from anywhere east of the Rockies. So they're going to pick up this cold from these ice and snow covered areas and then move eastward from that point. This will bring some pretty cold temperatures. We will go over that in a minute. So right now, as it stands, we're in a positive PNA, however. So that has been the pattern. We've seen the ridging here and these troughs coming from Canada. We're having that happen right now. These Arctic blasts straight from Canada, and they're weak. They are cold when they're in Canada, but they start to warm up as they move down, like I said, and they end up being marginal at best by the time they make it to the eastern states. So we are in what would typically be a very favorable pattern, but because of that ice and snow situation, it is not pulling through as it should. So let's keep going. I want to take us in, and again, a marginal cooldown again for the second into the third, with some storm opportunities. We get another Arctic blast there for the 4th and the 5th, but look, I mean, we have some cold air, but it's just not potent. It's not severe. It's marginal. We do have a storm here lined up with this cold air. This does have some potential during this time frame, the 3rd through the 5th, to create some sort of snowfall event for the eastern states. More on that coming up, obviously, over the coming days, and we'll know more. And then right around that 7th, 8th, 9th, look what happens. We get a trough in the west. This is when that negative PNA pattern starts, and look at how potent this is. Heavy snowfall throughout the northern plains, the Rockies, and as these troughs move down, they're going to bring snowfall and colder temperatures, which is going to make the next cool down that moves through have more and more snow and ice to work with. So it's going to be exponential how cold these western cooldowns will become. Mostly what we're going to be watching for is this right here, which is a storm kind of building here on the eastern end of things, featuring a cold front underneath, and this Arctic air able to work its way around, again, feeding in from those snow-covered areas out west. Eventually, if these could make their way to the east, would be more of potent cooldowns than what we're seeing. As we work our way through the GFS model, we see a pretty similar outlook. Again, marginal cooldown at best, nothing too severe or deep by any means. We get that negative PNA, so cold and snow out west that you can see there. I'm not even drawing on the screen because you can literally see what I'm talking about here. And then we get a massive snowstorm in the east right afterwards, after we finally get a cooldown coming from the west. Clearly, this model is indicating a pretty severe cooldown if we're seeing a major snowstorm here. 985 millibar low pressure center, very, very intense. We've had these storms, there's no doubt. I mean, we've had probably 4 nor'easters in the month of December, but none of them lined up with cold air enough to become snowstorms. They were all rainstorms and windstorms, which is much more of what you would expect to see in October and November, perhaps, which is exactly what our snow and ice would reflect, is much more of an October, November type pattern. So my thesis here is kind of looking correct. I definitely have put a lot of thought into this, and I'm curious to see how it pans out. You can see we head back into a positive PNA for a little bit here. Again, it is a transitional pattern, so we will see fluctuations like warm-ups and then cool downs a few days later, and then warm-ups again, and then cool down a few days later. This isn't going to be any sort of sustained pattern for now. We're in a much more transitional pattern where those warm-ups and cool downs are going to be continuously moving from west to east across the nation and across the globe overall, which is a pretty common occurrence, but sometimes they do last longer, sometimes they do stall out, and sometimes they do last days and even weeks at a time. We're certainly not in that, though, right now. Now, total snowfall or total precipitation here, we can see there is these coastal storms. So we have these to work with regardless, and that's going to be typical in an El Nino. And as this northern jet fluctuates, we're going to see storms come in at different angles for the west. We see some here for the northwest, some here for more of the southwest. As that jet stream fluctuates again, we're going to see these storms coming in at different angles onto the west coast. So everybody kind of cashes in on some precipitation there. Total snowfall in the European, we don't see anything line up for the east over the next 10 days here on this European model run. We do get storms with cold moving in, but again, I've talked about it time and time again. If those puzzle pieces don't come together at the exact right time, it's not going to pan out. And that's exactly what we see here. But look at how much snow we get out west. This is going to help the case for, again, these cooldowns moving through and moving eastward. They're going to be more potent because of this snowpack that is developing out west and worsening over time. When we look at the GFS's snowfall totals, we see a much more severe example here. Severe snow for the northern plains into the Rockies. And look, even as a result of this, we see southern Canada pick up a really nice snowpack over the next 15 days, to where later on in late January, if we do see cooldowns moving through Canada, they will be seasonable and they will be more intense than what we've seen. They will be very winter-like compared to these fall-like cooldowns we've had. So this upcoming pattern is extremely beneficial for the snowpack out west, the snowpack in Canada, which overall, whether we see snowfall or not over the next 15 days, long-term benefits the east as far as cold and snow is concerned. Now, the temperature pattern here, according to your European ensemble model, we get some of this southeast cold, but look, once we see that negative PNA come in, look at where this cool down goes. We see it really, really hammer in out west. We see a warm up straight to the east of there. We still get this kind of El Nino-like cool air in the southeast, but it's very marginal, like I mentioned. But look at it head eastward. Look at how potent that is. We see all the greens widespread throughout the central and some of these eastern states. We have not seen any of them that come down from Canada even look close to this. So getting that intrusion of that ice and snow cover that we see out west is extremely beneficial long term here for the east. And we see that cooler air trend in longer. We continue to see this model even through the midpoint of January show these negative PNA type temperatures, but we can tell that there's cold air in the east, likely meaning that we see a lot of this still transitioning eastward over time. So overall, a very different pattern, a much more unusual pattern long range, but because of the current ice and snow situation, because of the sea surface temperatures in the Pacific, I think that this is overall beneficial, although in most years this would be actually not what you want to see. Compared to what we've been seeing, this actually gives us a better chance at cold and snow compared to the lesser chance that you would see on normal years. I hope that makes sense. Very, very different video than what we're used to today, but I feel like there's been a lot on my mind here with this ice and snow stuff, considering this has played such a vital role and why December went the way it did and why we could see changes coming soon because of a multitude of different reasons. Let me know if you liked this video. Let me know if you learned anything. I think it's a very interesting topic overall. I'm curious to see how this impacts the United States over the course of the month of January, even as we head into February. I'm very excited to talk about it. We do upload every single day, so be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this one. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.